Hi everybody, my name's John Lacey, and today I want to talk to you all about the Elgato Prompter, which is a really nifty piece of hardware. And I'm a big fan of prompters generally, so teleprompters. I know most people hear that word and think about reading scripts, and that is certainly one application, but there are other things that you can do with them as well. So they're often a great thing in terms of actually maintaining an eye line if you're on a video call, which I think a lot of us are these days. So we're going to talk about not just the prompter itself, although it's probably going to be the least of today's discussion. What I really want to show you is how it interacts with other pieces of hardware and software in the Elgato ecosystem, specifically in terms of their camera hub software and also with the Elgato Stream Deck. I should really be really careful doing this because my cabling situation on my desk is a bit of a nightmare. So just wanted to show you I've got the extra large Stream Deck. So let's get into it. So first of all, what actually is a teleprompter? So essentially a teleprompter is something that you can put in front of a camera to show something else in front of that camera without obscuring the thing that the camera is capturing. And again, that can be literally anything. It can be reflected in that glass. So, you know, it could be a video meeting. It could be something on Teams, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Skype, whatever people are using these days. It could be a live streaming situation as well. So if you do happen to use Restream Studio or StreamYard, or even you could actually take your OBS Studio presentation and just throw that in front of there too, or the comments as well. So let's head over to the software and check this out. So first of all, I've got the Elgato Camera Hub software behind me, and I'm also going to show you the prompter sort of inserted just above my head on the screen. And I'm going to take you through some of these options and why I think this is actually a really nifty piece of gear that works really well with this software. So first of all, when you get your Elgato Prompter, you'll set it up. There are a whole bunch of different mounting options depending on whether you're using a phone to record, you know, a smaller camera or a DSLR camera as well, or a mirrorless camera for that matter. You can set that up and you can mount that however you want. So it's a good idea if it's somewhere that's going to capture you well. And once you do that, you do need to actually install a driver, which was a little surprising to me. I'm not going to lie. You do need to install that. And if you do find that you've got the Camera Hub software running and you can't see this prompter tab over here, it usually means either the prompter is not connected or you haven't installed that driver. So make sure you check those out. And basically from here, we've got a whole bunch of different options. So we've got the ability to select our output. And again, the fact that this is a drop down makes me think it might be possible to have multiple units. But again, I've only got one to play with today. We've got the power button. So if you don't want to actually use this all the time, you can turn that on and off. Although I must admit, I usually have mine running all the time and it hasn't been a problem. So we can also adjust the brightness and the contrast. So that is something to keep in mind, because if the display is too bright, it can potentially change the exposure of the camera that's hidden behind it. But then we get to the really interesting section here. So we've got three types of content that we can display. Display, which is literally just turns this into a monitor, and you can drag any kind of window here. Like I said, that could be, in this case, I've got my website here, and I could probably even just make that full screen, just to give you a sense of what that looks like. It could be your notes. It could be somebody else on a video call joining you, and you could actually have them and be looking directly at them. Because I guess in some ways that's the beauty of this, because often what usually happens is our camera might be just here, and we might be looking over here because that's where we can actually see the person we're talking to. And that's not a huge disaster, but it can be a little bit distracting. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. So just keep that in mind. But we can drag any kind of window here that we can display, and you can have a number of different things running there in the background as well. But let's just go back to the Elgato Camera Hub software. You've also got the ability to work with chat. So this is a beta option here. The thing that is important to keep in mind is this only works with Twitch. So I'm not a Twitch streamer, so I haven't had a great need to try this out. But again, if you are streaming on Twitch, that could be a really useful thing to check out. But one of the things that I'm really excited about is is this middle option, which is the text. And I'm just going to obscure the, just hide the prompter display there for a second so you can get a better sense of what this looks like. You can sort of bring in your text here and just type it in. So again, I'll show the prompter as I do this. It was the best of times. It was the blurst of times, if anyone gets that reference. And again, it could be something that you've written a speech somewhere and, you've got your notes. It doesn't need to be a verbatim thing you're reading. It could just be your prompts. It could be your talking points. It could be a list of bulleted items. But the thing you'll see here, and again, I'll just hide this for a second, this is all in one section, which is potentially fine. Like, you can actually sort of just scroll through this and read this out loud. That can be really useful. But what can be even more useful is to actually break these up into what they call chapters. So if I right click somewhere in here, we actually have a few different options such as split chapter, delete chapter, add chapter before, add chapter after. And the split chapter is Shift Enter as a keyboard shortcut on Windows. So again, if I do that, I can go Shift Enter, and I can do that again as well. And the great thing about this is that when you can sort of go through these in different ways. And again, let me just bring up the prompter display to give you a sense of what's actually happening here. So at the bottom of the Camera Hub software, you've got this play option, which you just hit the play button. It'll scroll through, it'll show you what you're reading in real time. You can actually go and adjust the settings on how fast that is, and I'll show you that in a second. But another thing you can do, if I click back to the beginning, you can also just go back and forward with these chapter markers. So if I maybe read my first item, went to my second item, my third item, whatever I wanted to do there. So that can be really, really cool as well. So let's just imagine for a moment that these are different segments from my live stream or my video. Okay, segment 1, segment 2, segment 3. Again, it may be a complete script. It may just be some talking points. That's kind of up to you. But you've got those options there. So I just want to explore some of the other options, and I'm actually not going to change a lot of these options right now, just because I'm actually pretty happy with the way this looks. I don't really want to change it too much. Although the other thing, and this will become important in a moment, is that we can add any number of scripts that we want. So, I've got this blank one. There is actually a welcome one, which is something that comes with the prompter itself. So again, you could sort of come in here and it's full of emojis, which I probably personally wouldn't include in a script, but it is what it is. But let's go back to our blank example with our 3 segments. So we do have the ability to change the appearance. So we can change the font, we can change the font size, we can change margins, line spacing, text, background, and opacity. Opacity is actually the thing I'm most excited about here, because imagine I was talking to somebody in my meeting and I want to look at my notes, but I also want to have a sense of what they're doing and saying and how they're reacting and what their body language is like. So I can actually adjust this and again, tweak the settings to whatever makes sense for you. I think I have 57% opacity there. Now I can actually see my script on top of the website, but in reality, this could be the video call, this could be the live stream, this could be anything you wanted underneath it. So that's really, really cool. We've got these scrolling options, so we can auto scroll the chapter, which, I think is fine. We can adjust the scroll speed. So if you are reading this as a speech, as a prepared lecture, then you can adjust that to make it make sense. The thing, and I probably should have turned this off to start with, but we have this setting here, and I'm going to turn the opacity right back up to 100% so you get a good sense of this. If I turn off the line marker, and I just go from segment 1, segment 2, segment 3, you'll see that they're all the same. But now have a look what happens when I actually turn the line marker back on, because this is really cool. So I read my segment 1. In fact, let's do it. Let's just hit the play button. Segment 1, you'll see that it's actually slightly graying out the text that I've already read. So it gives me a sense of where I'm actually up to. And that can work in scrolling mode. That can work just flicking between chapter to chapter. So if you need a visual indication that you've already covered something, that can be really, really useful. Okay, we do also have some overlays. I don't really use these at all, but I just want to mention them. So basically, the whole point of these overlays appears to be that if I turn this on, it'll give me a sense of the direct center of the teleprompter display. And I guess this is probably a good thing in terms of actually lighting your camera up, so it's capturing the right things, but also just reminding you where you need to look to be directly into the camera lens. And we've got a number of different pointers here. So if you've got crosses, circles, the camera, snap, square. Again, that's not something I use very, very often, but it is cool to know that it is there because it could be useful. All right, so those are most of the settings that we want to cover. And really, that in itself is really cool. You can certainly open up the Camera Hub software. You could use your mouse to go through your script. You could hit play. You can adjust the physical size that's been reflected in here. But in a lot of ways, the power of all of this is that because it's Elgato, all this stuff relates to each other. So their software relates to the Stream Deck and the Camera Hub, and this all comes together in a really, really powerful way. So I just want to bring up the Stream Deck software. Let's go back to where we were. I have so many windows open, it's kind of ridiculous. But anyway, I've prepared some of these things earlier, so I'm just going to delete them really quickly, and then I'll show you what they all do. So again, if you ever have the opportunity to get a Stream Deck, that can be so incredibly useful. You can set them up to do all kinds of things. And if you want to check out the video and live streaming show, Sam Proof and I have done an entire episode on the Stream Deck. But essentially, once you've got your prompter set up, you've downloaded and installed the driver, you've downloaded and installed the Camera Hub software, you can actually come up to the Elgato Marketplace and just make sure you've selected the Camera Hub, because this will give you a whole bunch of different options. A lot of these relate to other parts of that software, not necessarily just about the prompter. And we'll ignore most of those for today's purposes, but just be aware that those are there. So if we scroll, and all the prompter ones, because I was going to say these were listed alphabetically. They're clearly not. But the prompter ones are sort of grouped at the bottom, I guess, because that is the new feature of this software. So we have the prompter control, we have the prompter display, we have prompter mode, prompter appearance, scrolling, and overlay. So let's have a look at these ones. So if we go to the prompter control, and again, if you want to add a button to your Stream Deck, just drag it over to an empty space. And for the prompter control, we have 3 basic settings: play and pause, scroll, and select. And again, these will probably be pretty obvious when I hit the button and show you what this does. So at the moment, we've got play and pause. Hit the button, it starts going through my script. If I want to pause that at any time, I can hit that same button again. In terms of scrolling, this one is a little less sort of intuitive, I find. But essentially, with scroll, you've got a step size. And anything that's positive will actually go up, and you can adjust how dramatically that goes up. Although this is interesting too, because this is an example of a button that you actually hold down to go up rather than just press once. So you can adjust how dramatically that is. But if you have a negative value, so if we maybe drag this down to -2, it'll actually move down in the opposite direction. And you can probably see too over here that it actually shows you that direction when you nominate the step size. So those things are really, really cool. But for my money, the best one here is actually select. So select will show you different things here. And this is the kind of the power of this. We've got the ability to select the kind of content that we want to select. In this case, we've got the choice between the chat messages or the text. I'm going to go to text. And then we've got a whole bunch of options here for previous, next, first, last, and index. So again, let's just say that one is previous. I'm actually going to grab another button and put it just beside that one. Hopefully you can see that. Yep, cool. All right. And I'm going to go select. And again, just make sure it's on text. And I'm going to go next. So now you can see that segment 2 is highlighted. If I hit the previous button, it'll take me back to segment 1. If I press the next, segment 2, and then segment 3. That's really, really useful. Another thing that is quite useful is if I drag another instance of the prompter control over here, and I'll go down to select as my setting, make sure it's on text. And I've also got first and last. So this is really great. So if you have a script and you need to go back to the beginning, so maybe you're rehearsing a presentation before you go live, I can now just press this button and it'll take me to the beginning. So that is really, really cool. And again, the steps, if we go to last, it'll do the same sort of thing. I should mention too, you do have the ability to give these names. So if I go start, like this is a title that will physically appear on the button, you can actually go in and change the icon on the button as well, but I'm not going to worry about that for the moment. Let's just drag that over there. So those things are really, really cool. And again, you can kind of use those in conjunction with each other, and it is really, really useful. So the prompter display is the next one I want to talk to you about. This gives us a number of different settings. So we can turn the power on and off. Again, if you're not using it, you might as well turn it off. Although, like I said earlier, I very rarely actually do that, but it could be a useful thing. We can also adjust the brightness and the contrast. So the brightness especially, it may actually adjust the exposure of the camera if it is too bright, and we can sort of change, we can set that to a specific amount of brightness. In this case, it's 100%. We could drag that down to something smaller. And again, you can't see the difference, but I certainly can on my end. But you can also adjust it in relative terms. So, you know, if you want to do it in steps or with a slider, you have that option as well too. And you can do a similar thing for the contrast. So again, if you want to adjust those on the fly, maybe you need more contrast for your script or your display, one or the other, you can certainly explore those. I'm just going to get rid of that button for the moment because I don't really need that one. Okay, so our next one is the prompter mode. This is probably my favorite thing of all because, you know, we can actually change what we're looking at. And there are two different ways that we can do this. We can just set it and say, okay, just show me the display when I click this button. So I can go display. But even more useful than that is we do have this toggle option. So I can say, you know, show me the display and then switch to the text. And if you do have the text option, you do need to nominate a script. So again, for our purposes, we'll just work with this blank one today. So now it's currently showing me my display. I can click on my script. It's actually taking me back to the beginning, which is kind of a useful thing to do as well. And I can sort of toggle back and forth between that with the click of a button on the Stream Deck. And I guess, you know, we talked about the opacity, and we'll probably talk about that again in a second, but the only thing to keep in mind is that even if you reduce the opacity, you won't be able to interact with the thing that's on the display until you toggle that away. So you can have your notes or your meeting agenda on top of your meeting, but if you actually need to interact with something, if you need to open up a chat window within that software, if you need to start sharing a screen via that software, then you will need to toggle back to the display to access that. So just keep that in mind. And I guess the other great thing about this too is because you nominate scripts, if you imagine you had a show with 4 segments and you actually had 4 different scripts, you could actually set up buttons to just switch to those at different times. So that can be really, really cool as well. So that is something that I certainly use all of the time. And again, I'm just going to press it again so we can go back to our script. So that was the prompter mode. We've got prompter appearance. So again, this is the place where you can sort of dynamically change all of those settings in terms of font size, horizontal and vertical margins, opacity and line spacing. So again, the opacity one is probably really good. There might be times when you know, you want to set that to 48%, just so I can see the meeting or the thing that's underneath it. And you could set up another button to make it go back to 100 if you wanted to. But you can also adjust these in steps as well. So, you know, I could make it more or less opaque. But again, I could have 2 buttons, and one is basically increase the opacity, one is reduce it. So you could certainly do that as well. Again, I'm not really changing the visual display of the prompter too much because I actually really like the settings it came with. So I'm very happy with those. Okay, so prompter scrolling is another one. So here we've got the ability to change the scroll speed, which is a surprisingly difficult thing to say. So again, I can change it. I can sort of just set it as a particular number, and you may, once you practice reading from this, you may get a sense that, okay, sometimes I need to be at 41 and sometimes I need to be at 25. Or again, you can set up buttons to adjust this sort of in terms of steps. And you might have, a positive button to increase the scroll speed or a negative one to reduce it potentially. And finally, the prompter overlay. So we have that here. Again, you can show the overlay, you can show the pointer. So if I wanted to just remind myself where the center of this is, I can press the button. And that actually didn't work for me. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe I need to have that on the... There we go. So if I have that on the show overlay, so I guess the settings here are, and again, you could do this with two different buttons. So I can change I can decide what the pointer should be. So it defaulted to that one. Maybe I want it to be this one. If I press that now, I can see that. If I press the earlier one, it'll toggle it on and off. Again, that's actually probably the least exciting feature, but it can be useful in terms of actually lining these things up. So that's really what I wanted to show you today. I was meaning to actually make a complete video about this, but I thought it might be easier just to go live and talk about it. And it's actually a public holiday here in Australia today, so I had a little bit more time. So I think, the prompter is a great unit. It comes with the display and the prompter together. And those are two things that I had to buy separately in earlier versions of my setup. I love that they come together. I love that it's all powered and operated through one USB port. So that's at least one less cable that I need in my setup. That's really, really cool as well. But in some ways, the thing I really wanted to illustrate today is the elegance of this solution really comes from its ability to interact with the Camera Hub software and also the Stream Deck software. So I hope that's been useful. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave them in the chat or the comments wherever you happen to be watching this. And thank you so much for joining me today. Have a great week.